We can fertilize our food. Each one of us is pooping and peeing something that could fertilize half or maybe all of our food, depending on our diet. That dark brown poop in the toilet is dark brown because of what? Dead stuff, bacteria. That's carbon. And carbon, if we're getting that into the soil, is going to bind to the other minerals and nutrients in there. Boom. Healthier food. Voila. Healthier people. Chemical fertilizers, by definition, don't have carbon in them. Imagine if we could move our animal manure and our human manure to our soil. We might not need to rely on fossil fuel-based fertilizers and mine minerals from far away. Imagine how much energy we could save. Now, some of us are concerned about industrial pollutants contaminating this reuse cycle. That can be addressed, but we need to separate our discomfort about talking about poop and pee so we can calmly talk about how we want to reuse it and what things we don't want to reuse. And get this, if we change our approach to sanitation, we can start to slow down climate change. Remember that carbon in the poop? If we can get that into our soil bank, it's going to start to absorb carbon dioxide that we put into the air, and that could help slow down global warming. Why are there so many jobs? There are actually two fundamental economic principles at stake. One has to do with human genius and creativity. The other has to do with human insatiability, or greed, if you like. I'm going to call the first of these the O-ring principle, and it determines the type of work that we do. The second principle is the never get enough principle, and it determines how many jobs there actually are. Let's start with the O-ring. ATMs, automated teller machines, had two countervailing effects on bank teller employment. As you would expect, they replaced a lot of teller tasks. The number of tellers per branch fell by about a third. But banks quickly discovered that it also was cheaper to open new branches, and the number of bank branches increased by about 40% in the same time period. The net result was more branches and more tellers. But those tellers were doing somewhat different work. As their routine, cash handling tasks receded, they became less like checkout clerks and more like salespeople, forging relationships with customers, solving problems, and introducing them to new products like credit cards, loans, and investments. More tellers doing a more cognitively demanding job. There's a general principle here. Most of the work that we do requires a multiplicity of skills, and brains and brawn, technical expertise and intuitive mastery, perspiration and inspiration, in the words of Thomas Edison. In general, automating some subset of those tasks doesn't make the other ones unnecessary. In fact, it makes them more important. It increases their economic value. Work comes to be the center around which the world turns. Human beings start to see themselves chiefly as workers, and the entirety of life becomes more and more work, or work-like. To see this, we can begin to examine a number of what I might call tightening conditions. So the first condition would be the centrality of work. We've come to think that work is actually the center and everything else begins to turn around it, that we are preparing for work, that we are preparing to leave work. And this is happening all the way around the world. Meanwhile, we're adjusting our schedules, the rest of our lives, so that they are turning about it. So that would be the first condition. The second condition is subordination, that everything else in life comes to seem as if it's subordinate to and to be put in the service of work. We can think of sleeping. The idea is that we wish to sleep well today in order to be focused and prepared for work, and that when we're at work, we wish to be as productive as possible. So sleep becomes that which is an instrument in the service of productivity, and we can play that game with all sorts of different instances. The third condition is the resemblance claim. It seems as if everything else in life comes to resemble work more and more. So you can think of, on a day off, you are wanting to be as productive as possible, thinking about how much you got done. You can begin to think about all the ways in which you plan and schedule time with children, the terms that begin to mark out our lives, even when we're not actually working, sound more and more work-like. And the last condition, I think, is the most intense, and that's what might be called cultural forgetfulness. We've come to almost forget that there was a time in which work was not the center of the world, that there are other ways of life that precede the modern world, in which work was a part of life, but was not the focus of life. We forget that that's still true today with other cultures, some other cultures, and we forget that there could actually be a time when work would not be that around which the rest of the world turns. You know, back in the 40s and 50s, the original standard television had a 4:3 width to height ratio. That shape was chosen to be a slight rectangle, but still mostly square, thus having the maximal screen area for the given dimensions. And that's still the ratio on many TVs and computer monitors in today's homes. The problem is, hardly anybody today treats video content in a 4:3 ratio. See, this whole problem started when people wanted to watch movies from the theater in the comfort of their own homes. Movie screens are considerably larger than our home television. More importantly, the screen is a completely different rectangle and can't mathematically fit on our TV screens without manipulation. A typical TV is 1 1/3 times wider than it is tall. Some movie screens could be up to 3 times as wide as it is tall. So what are we going to do to make it fit? Well, we have all kinds of options. Well, we could squeeze and stretch and mangle everything onto the screen to make it all fill up, and everyone would look ridiculously thin and compressed. The good news is the sound would be just fine. Although I don't think people would be too happy about that option, particularly the actors in the movie. We could just cut a chunk of the original movie like a cookie cutter and just see that frame of the movie. The problem with that would be that people and objects would be speaking from off the screen. Or even worse, they might be cut in half. Some movie editors use what's called the pan and scan technique to allow the full height of the TV screen to be used. But pick and choose what section of the original movie should be shown on your screen, thus eliminating the annoying cutting of people. And systematic errors don't just appear in matters of human judgment. From 1993 to 2008, the same female DNA was found in multiple crime scenes around Europe, incriminating an elusive killer dubbed the Phantom of Heilbronn. But the DNA evidence was so consistent precisely because it was wrong. It turned out that the cotton swabs used to collect the DNA samples had all been accidentally contaminated by a woman working in the swab factory. In other cases, systematic errors arise through deliberate fraud, like the presidential referendum held by Saddam Hussein in 2002, which claimed a turnout of 100% of voters, with all 100% supposedly voting in favor of another 7-year term. When you look at it this way, the paradox of unanimity isn't actually all that paradoxical. Unanimous agreement is still theoretically ideal, especially in cases when you'd expect very low odds of variability and uncertainty. But in practice, achieving it in situations where perfect agreement is highly unlikely should tell us that there's probably some hidden factor affecting the system. Although we may strive for harmony and consensus, in many situations, error and disagreement should be naturally expected. And if a perfect result seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Thank you for watching. This video will help you a lot, and subscribe our channel Vital PTE Academy to see more education related videos of PTE Academy. I will meet you in next video.